Marcus Wellington's Mercedes glided through the iron gates of his estate, sleek and silent as a predator. In the backseat, his 8-year-old son Oliver pressed his face against the window, watching the manicured lawns blur past. The leather still smelled new, that intoxicating scent of luxury and success that Marcus had worked 20 years to afford. They'd just left the country club where Marcus had closed a deal worth $3 million over steak and scotch. Success tasted good. It always had. "Dad, can we stop at the park?" Oliver asked, his voice small in the leather-wrapped interior, almost lost beneath the soft purr of the engine. "Not today, buddy. Daddy's got another meeting in an hour." Marcus glanced at his Rolex, the gold catching the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the tinted windows. He was mentally calculating the time he'd need to shower, change into his grey Armani suit, and review the Henderson portfolio before the video conference. Oliver didn't respond, just kept staring out the window with that distant look he sometimes got. Marcus made a mental note to spend more quality time with his son this weekend. Maybe take him to that new science museum he'd been asking about. Quality time. That's what the parenting books called it. Marcus had a stack of them on his nightstand, right next to the financial reports he actually read. They pulled up to a red light downtown, an intersection Marcus usually avoided. His driver had called in sick today, forcing Marcus to navigate the less pristine parts of the city himself. Construction had detoured them through this forgotten neighborhood where broken windows stared like empty eyes and graffiti decorated every available surface. A figure huddled against the brick wall of a shuttered grocery store caught his eye for a fraction of a second before he looked away. Just another homeless person. The city was full of them, an unfortunate reality of urban life. He'd donated to 3 charities this year alone, $50,000 split between the Homeless Coalition, the food bank, and a youth shelter. What more could anyone expect? "Dad, look." Oliver's voice carried a strange urgency that made Marcus's stomach tighten inexplicably. "Eyes forward, son. Don't stare. It's rude." Marcus kept his gaze fixed on the traffic light, willing it to turn green. Red. Still red. Why were downtown lights always so impossibly long? But Oliver had already twisted in his seat, his small hand pressed flat against the glass, leaving fingerprints that would annoy Marcus later. "Dad, wait. Stop the car. Please." "Oliver, we've talked about this. You can't help everyone. That's just how the world works. We do our part through proper channels, through donations and—" "Dad, that's MOM." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart with an icy fist. His foot slammed the brake even though they were already stopped, his body reacting before his mind could process. The car behind them blared its horn, a long angry sound that seemed to come from very far away. His hands went numb on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his breath suddenly trapped in his lungs. "What did you say?" Oliver was crying now, tears streaming down his cheeks as he pointed with a trembling finger at the woman huddled in a stained coat 3 sizes too big, drowning in fabric that might have once been blue or grey but was now the colour of city dirt and broken dreams. Her hair was matted, hanging in clumps around a face hidden behind trembling hands that held a cardboard sign. Even from this distance, Marcus could see how thin those hands were, the knobby knuckles, the dirt under the fingernails. "That's Mom. That's my mom. I know it is. I know her hands. I know the way she sits. Dad, that's her." Marcus's heart stopped. His ex-wife Sarah had disappeared 4 years ago, vanishing 2 weeks after their bitter divorce. One day she'd been living in a modest apartment across town. The next her landlord called saying she'd abandoned the lease, left everything behind. He'd hired investigators who found nothing but dead ends and cold trails. Her family claimed they hadn't heard from her, their voices tight with worry that eventually faded into resigned silence. Her friends knew nothing. Her bank account sat untouched. Eventually, after 18 months of searching and tens of thousands spent on private detectives, he'd assumed she'd started over somewhere far away, maybe remarried under a different name, changed her identity, fled to another state or even another country. He'd told Oliver his mother loved him but needed to find herself, that sometimes adults had to go away to figure out who they were. It was easier than the truth that she'd simply vanished, easier than admitting Marcus had no answers, easier than watching his son's face crumple with the knowledge that his mother had chosen to disappear rather than stay. Oliver had been 4 years old when Sarah left. He'd cried himself to sleep for 6 months, asking every night when Mommy was coming home. Marcus had hired the best child psychologist in the state, had read every book on helping children cope with abandonment, had held his son through nightmares and tantrums and the terrible quiet moments that were somehow worse than the tears. And now Oliver was saying she was here. Right here. 20 feet away, sitting on a piece of cardboard in front of a building that probably hadn't seen a customer in 5 years. He pulled the car over, tires scraping the curb, ignoring the traffic, ignoring the angry gestures from the driver behind them, ignoring everything except the impossible possibility that his son might be right. Marcus's hand shook as he unbuckled his seatbelt. His mind raced through 1,000 explanations, each one more desperate than the last. It couldn't be her. Oliver was mistaken. The boy had been 4. How could he possibly remember? It was just wishful thinking, the grief playing tricks, a resemblance that meant nothing. As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, his $1,000 Italian leather shoes touching the gum-stained concrete, the woman looked up. Maybe she'd heard the commotion, the car pulling over, the door opening. Maybe some survival instinct made her alert to any change in her environment. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, skin weathered and marked with the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep. And Marcus saw his wife's green eyes staring back at him from a stranger's ruined face. Those eyes. He'd fallen in love with those eyes 14 years ago at a coffee shop near the university, when Sarah had been a graduate student with paint under her fingernails and dreams of opening her own art gallery. Those eyes had sparkled at their wedding, had filled with tears of joy when Oliver was born, had gone cold and distant during the fights that ended their marriage. He'd looked into those eyes 1,000 times, had memorized every fleck of gold around the pupils, every shade of emerald and forest green. And now those same eyes stared at him, wide with shock and recognition and something that looked terrifyingly like shame, from the face of a homeless woman holding a sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." Time seemed to stop. The city noise faded to white static. Marcus was vaguely aware of Oliver scrambling out of the car behind him, of his son's small feet hitting the pavement, of movement and sound, but all he could focus on was Sarah's face. His mind couldn't reconcile the woman he'd divorced with this hollow-cheeked ghost, couldn't bridge the gap between the Sarah who'd worn designer clothes to gallery openings and this woman whose coat was held together with safety pins. How had this happened? How had 4 years erased the person she'd been and left this stranger in her place? Sarah dropped her sign, the cardboard clattering to the pavement with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Her mouth opened but no sound came out, her lips forming words that wouldn't materialize, as if speech itself had become a foreign concept. Her entire body had gone rigid, frozen in that terrible moment between hope and fear, between the past and whatever came next. Oliver had already bolted from the car, his small legs pumping as he ran toward her with his arms outstretched, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He moved with the absolute certainty of a child who knows his mother, who could recognize her across any distance, through any transformation. Sarah caught him as he crashed into her, her thin body nearly toppling backward from the force of his embrace. Her arms wrapped around him instinctively, desperately, as if he might disappear if she didn't hold tight enough. She buried her face in his hair, and the sound that came from her throat was something Marcus had only heard in hospital waiting rooms, that raw animal grief mixed with overwhelming joy. "My baby, my baby, my baby," she whispered over and over, rocking him back and forth on the dirty sidewalk, her voice breaking on every syllable. Her hands moved across his back, his shoulders, his face, as if confirming he was real, memorizing every inch of the boy who'd been 4 when she'd last held him and was now 8, half-grown, a different person entirely. Marcus stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. A small crowd had begun to gather, pedestrians stopping to watch this strange reunion, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. Someone had their phone out, probably filming. Marcus didn't care. All his careful control, his business acumen, his ability to navigate any social situation with practiced ease, all of it had abandoned him completely. "Sarah." His voice came out strangled, barely recognizable. He took a step forward, then another, moving like a man walking through deep water. "How? What happened to you? Where have you been?" She looked up, still clutching Oliver, and the shame in her eyes was so deep it seemed to swallow all the light around them. Her face was streaked with tears, cutting clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. "After the divorce, I lost everything, Marcus. Everything just fell apart so fast." Her voice was hoarse, roughened by years of cold nights and shouting to be heard over city traffic. "My depression got worse. So much worse. I couldn't get out of bed some days. I lost my job at the gallery, then the freelance work dried up. I lost my apartment. I lost my car. I lost myself." Oliver pulled back slightly, his young face serious beyond his years, his eyes red from crying but focused entirely on his mother. "But why didn't you come home? Why didn't you call us?" Sarah's face crumpled. She touched his cheek with trembling fingers, Fingers that Marcus now noticed were scarred and rough, so different from the soft hands that used to paint delicate watercolors on Sunday mornings. My pride kept me from asking for help at first. I thought I could fix it myself, get back on my feet. And then I thought you were both better off without me. I thought I was protecting you from seeing your mother fall apart. She looked at Marcus, pleading for understanding. I didn't want Oliver to see me like this. I didn't want him to know his mother had become this. Marcus felt his anger rising, but it was mixed with something else, something that felt uncomfortably like guilt. You thought abandoning your son was protecting him? Do you have any idea what the last 4 years have been like? The nightmares? The therapy? The way he'd run to the window every time he heard a car, thinking you might be coming home. I wrote letters, Sarah said quickly, urgently, her words tumbling over each other. Every week for 2 years. I sent them to your office. I called your assistant. I stood outside your building 3 times, trying to work up the courage to come inside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was told you'd given instructions not to forward anything from me. I was told you'd call the police if I tried to make contact. The words hit Marcus like a slap. His assistant, Margaret. The loyal, efficient Margaret who'd been with him for 7 years, who anticipated his needs, who managed his schedule with military precision. He told her to handle any attempts at contact from Sarah in those first angry months after the divorce, when Sarah had been calling repeatedly, when he'd wanted clean boundaries, when he'd been so furious about the separation that he couldn't see straight. He'd meant legal correspondence, or so he'd told himself. But Margaret had taken it literally, had built a wall around him and Oliver, protecting them from what she'd assumed was unwanted interference. I didn't know, Marcus whispered, though the excuse felt hollow even as he said it. His throat felt tight, his chest constricted. He could have checked. He could have asked questions. He could have tried harder to find her, could have pushed the investigators more, could have done so many things differently. Sarah, I swear I didn't know about the letters. I thought you just disappeared. Started over somewhere. A woman from the gathered crowd stepped forward, middle-aged with kind eyes and a nurse's scrubs under her jacket. Does she need medical attention? Should I call someone? Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Yes. No. I mean, he looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw how thin she was, how her skin had that greyish pallor that spoke of malnutrition and illness. When's the last time you ate? A real meal. Sarah's laugh was bitter and broken. Define real meal. Yesterday someone gave me half a sandwich. The day before, the shelter had soup. Oliver's small voice cut through everything else. Mom, are you sick? Do you need help? We can help you. Dad has lots of money now. He can fix this. The simple certainty in his son's voice broke something in Marcus's chest. This 8-year-old boy, who'd been abandoned and hurt and confused for 4 years, was already planning how to help, already offering solutions, already ready to forgive. While Marcus had been standing there calculating and analyzing and protecting himself, his son had jumped straight to love. Marcus made a decision in that moment that would have seemed impossible an hour ago, when he'd been driving past in his Mercedes, deliberately not looking at the homeless woman on the corner. He crouched down to Oliver and Sarah's level, his expensive suit pants touching the dirty concrete, his hand reaching out slowly to touch Sarah's shoulder. She flinched slightly, as if unexpected kindness was more shocking than cruelty. Get in the car, he said, his voice steady now, certain. Both of you. We are going to fix this. Sarah shook her head, pulling back. Marcus, no. I can't. You don't owe me anything. The divorce was final. I made my choices and... Please. The word came out raw, honest, stripped of all his usual composure. Let me help. Let me try to fix what I helped break. Maybe I didn't know about the letters, but I knew you were struggling before the divorce. I knew you were depressed. I knew you needed help, and I was too angry, too focused on my own hurt to really see it. So please, let me do this now. Oliver grabbed his mother's hand, his small fingers wrapping around hers. Please, Mom. Please come with us. I missed you so much. Every single day. Sarah looked between her son and her ex-husband, tears streaming freely now, and slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. Marcus helped her to her feet, feeling how light she was, how fragile, like she might blow away in a strong wind. The crowd dispersed as he guided them to the car, someone calling out "God bless you" as they walked away. As they drove toward his estate, Oliver chattering nervously between them, Telling his mother about school and his friends and everything she'd missed, Marcus caught Sarah's eyes in the rearview mirror. She looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure, like someone who'd been drowning and couldn't quite believe they'd been pulled from the water. "We'll take this one step at a time," Marcus said quietly. "First, food. Then a doctor. Then we figure out the rest." Sarah's voice was barely audible over Oliver's excited chatter. "Thank you." Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel, thinking about all the times he'd driven past people like Sarah, all the times he'd looked away, all the times he'd told himself that writing checks to charity was enough. "Thank Oliver," he said. "He's the one who refused to look away."